My name's Lee Robertson. I'm an entrepreneur, I guess, as they say. I'm a past master entrepreneur. We're joined by the current master entrepreneur and obviously court assistants with us. We're part of the modern delivery. If you want to know more as you become entrepreneurs and you grow your businesses, please feel free to get in touch. It's about fellowship, it's about helping each other, and it's about entrepreneurs sharing ideas and best practice and moving forward together. My background, I'm ex-forces, and then I fell back into financial services, ended up building one of the most high-profile wealth management businesses in the UK before I sold it to my team. And I now run a private social network for financial services professionals. So I've done the whole thing of being on TV and all that kind of stuff. And funnily enough, that's where Rowan and I met. And I'm going to ask Rowan to introduce himself now.
Thank you. I'm Rowan Jackson. I'm a former client of Lee's, would you believe it?
So, small world.
Small world. Like Lee, I was also in the forces. I was in the Royal Marines for 20 years, and that's going to be part of this story. This evening, what I'm going to do is I'm going to cover 5 specific areas about getting the right people on the bus for those of you who have aspirations either to start a company or have already started one. It doesn't really matter. The expression getting the right people on the bus comes from this book by Jim Collins, which some of you may have read. I won't be surprised if it's mandatory reading in London Business School. Extremely good book, but it's about big companies. But the interesting thing about the book, and interesting thing from my perspective as an entrepreneur, is I'm rereading it and seeing that there's a lot of lessons in this book for actually people trying to start companies. So I encourage you to read it. I want to start by actually reading you a piece from it. And it says here, the executives who started to make their companies great from being good, which is a euphemism for mediocre, did not first figure out where to drive the bus and then get people to take it there. What they first did was to get the right people on the bus and the wrong people off the bus, and then figured out where to drive it. Interesting thought. They said, in essence, I don't really know where we're going to take this bus, but I know this much. If we get the right people on the bus and the right people in the right seats and the wrong people off the bus, then we'll figure out how to take it somewhere great. And that's an interesting place to start, isn't it? Those of you who are starting your businesses will often find that where you think you're going to go isn't the place you're going to end up. And so one of the things that I'd like to go through this evening is, what are the things that might help you on that journey, particularly with the relationship of getting the right people on the bus. I think it's worth saying that Lee and I and the other freemen of the company of entrepreneurs will tell you probably much more loquaciously over a glass of wine how many mistakes they've made in this area. We've all made a lot of mistakes in getting the wrong people on the bus, and then we find ourselves in the difficulty of trying to get them off. I might add also that what I'm going to talk about this evening is based on having made those mistakes myself. And therefore, there are some lessons, hard-learned lessons that are coming from this. I think it's also worth saying that for a small business, getting the wrong people at the beginning can be a very serious and a very expensive mistake. And again, I've been through that, so I can talk a little bit about that. In what I'm going to talk about, I'm going to cover 5 specific areas, but they both come under the general heading of selection and recruitment. And I relate back here to the time I was in the Royal Marines, where I was responsible for selecting potential officers for the Royal Marines. And at that time, they sent me on a 2-day course, how to carry out a selection interview. It's probably one of the best courses I've ever done in my life. Phenomenally valuable, run by psychologists. And if you don't have that in mind in starting your business, may I encourage you to do so, because it really is an extremely powerful thing to have done. Later on, I went to become a master facilitator for training people to do this. So I trained companies how to, for leaders in companies, how to carry out candidate interviews. But it is really fundamental that you get that selection and recruitment piece right. I've driven the mind map for what I'm going to talk about this evening. And if any of you want a copy of the mind map, it won't look like that because I'm not going to put it on, I'll put it on software. If you want it, all you need to do is give me your email address and then I'll email it to you. But I want to start with the 5 things that are a key here. The first one is define what you're looking for. It might sound blindingly obvious that, but it is absolutely astonishing how few companies do that. I was chairman of a recruitment business at one stage in my life, and we used to be sent papers from our clients with a definition of what they're looking for. And we sort of hold up this rather wet piece of paper and say, is that all? Because they really hadn't thought it through. It's astonishingly badly done in many companies' cases. So here's a few thoughts for thinking about what you're going to write down about what you're looking for. I've used a few mnemonics, and the first mnemonic is BATV. So when you're writing down what you're looking for, think about these things. The B stands for what are the basic competencies that you're looking for in your candidates. If somebody is going to lead a team, either now or in the future, you're going to be looking for how good are they at running a team. The second is E, which stands for experience. If you're looking, let's say, for an app designer, it would be useful to know that that person has actually designed an app beforehand, because you don't want them trying out how to do app design on you. I once had an operation on my knee, and the interview with the surgeon went along the lines of, how many times have you done this operation before? And he said, well, I do 10 a week. And I said, thank God for that, because if I was your first patient, I wouldn't be talking anymore to you. So that's what the E is about, experience. So what's the experience necessary for you and your business that you're thinking about? The A stands for attitudes. And I'm going to come back to attitudes, but they are fundamentally important. And here's a thought that I'd like you to think about and take away with you. Is the person you're looking for going to be somebody who's going to give energy to your newly formed company? In other words, what we call a heater that energizes the business. Or are they a drain? They're going to suck energy out of it. Think about that, because that's attitudinal. I'm going to come back to attitudes in a second or two. The T stands for technical competencies. And many of you will be looking for people who have got some sort of technical skills. I'm going to come back to that a lot because it makes a big difference today with massive advances in technology. And the V stands for values. Those of you who are creating companies, if you haven't actually written down what your values are, I suggest you start with that. Because you're going to interview candidates based on your values and looking at them, and do they actually come in line with what you value in your business? So that's the first of the mnemonics. Now, the second mnemonic comes back to attitudes. I said I would come back to attitudes. It has been shown by research that the biggest difference between high performers and average performers in any category that you like is attitude. And I can show you a little bit more about that later. It's been well researched. But in addition to that, you as a starter of a business, somebody who's creating a new business, will be wanting to think about not just, have I got the people with the right attitudes today, but actually, will they have the right attitudes in next year or the year after? So you're looking for potential, people who are going to grow with the business. And Egon Zehnder have done a lot of research into this area. There's a book written about it. And the things that they're looking for in potential terms come under the headings of DICE, DICE. So the first, the D, stands for what sort of levels of determination do these people show? And the D also stands for discipline. Are they disciplined in what they're trying to achieve? Very quickly, you know that if you're taking on somebody who is chaotic in their personal organization, they're not going to be much help to you. The I stands for intelligence and insight. And psychologists, both here and in London, University College London, will tell you that actually intelligence really does matter. You need bright people in your business because what they're going to give you is insight. They're going to give you that ability to look forward and to help you to challenge your own thinking about the way you're going to run your company. The C has 4 meanings, and these are really important ones. And when I was recruiting officers in the Royal Marines, these are the ones that we look for. Curiosity. Are they capable of learning, and do they want to learn more things? And are they curious about finding out new things that they're going to do? Courage. You've got to have people in your business who've got to be able to stand up for and do some things which will test their moral courage quite a lot. I can talk a little about that. Critical thinking. Are they good at thinking through some of the things? Or do they, the sort of people, are they taking on the latest fad? And I can talk a little bit about that more in questions. And the last one of the C is commitment. I started my company, my second company, in 2009, and we don't yet pay the people on the payroll any salaries. It's 11 years without a salary. That is commitment. Of course, they do get money because every time we win some business, they get paid. But the point being is they're not on salaries. That's the sort of commitment I'm talking about. And commitment is really, really fundamental. You need people who are going to commit to your business idea. Tied to that are the E's, the three words that come with E: energy, engagement, and enthusiasm. And if you're going out to the financial area to find money, I think there's a fourth one, and it's called executive presence. Do the people on your team demonstrate the sort of presence they're going to be able to display in front of potential investors? It really matters. One investor that I know very well said, I put 80% of my scoring on the company that I'm about to invest in on the management team. Do they have the credibility? And can I believe what they're saying? So that's the first one. That's your first of your five. Any questions or thoughts on that? Or should we leave them till later?
I've got a question, if I may. The intelligence part, you want to hire bright people. With bright people can often come problems.
Yes.
Challenge.
Yes.
Over challenge.
Yes.
Do you want to expand a bit on that? You'll find that in any business, the brightest will challenge the most.
Yeah, particularly the intelligent idiot. We all know what the intelligent idiots are like. They're so bright, but they cannot carry out a decent conversation. I have worked, absolutely delightful, lovely guy, ex-Trinity College, Cambridge. He doesn't speak English, he speaks Trinity College, Cambridge. But put him in front of clients, he's hopeless. So bright, lovely person, but I wouldn't take him anywhere in front of clients.
So how do you deal with that?
Yeah, you've got to really, really find out actually in the next stage of our talk is, are they going to be suitable for the roles that you're envisaging here? So defining the roles, the first step. Yeah.
I have a question. So you're describing kind of the perfect person here.
Yes, of course.
So my question is, do you recommend deciding what's the most important for the business?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And really do narrow it right down. The absolutely essentials that you need, and then the sort of desirables. It would be nice if they had this as well.
I can tell you, and Rowan would back this up, it is rare to find the perfect person.
Yeah.
You either have to adapt to them and help them grow, or you've got to grow into the way they work.
And the best organizations actually help them to do that. So it's about thinking about, so what's the plan for your development? We know collectively together as a little team that you can't do this, but we're going to work with you to be able to help you to do it. It's a very powerful message. The second of our areas is one that may surprise you a little bit, and this is actually born out of some really hard-won scars of getting it wrong. It's about define the selection process that you're going to use for recruiting your people. And why do I say that? Well, I've actually not done this and found out to my cost that this was a piece that was missing badly. And here the mnemonic is PRETS, as in pret-a-manger, P-R-E-T-S. The first two come together. It's about preparation and rigor. Let me just give you an example of what I mean by preparation. And here's a sort of thought for you. How many of you have actually carried out a selection interview before? Don't put, a couple of you, sorry, all right, good. What preparation did you have before you did that interview for carrying out that interview? How much training did you have to do it? Only a few, one or two. I'm a speaker for Vistage, which is a chief executives organization, and I was running a session for 25 chief executives for recruitment companies. And I said to them the same question I've asked you. How many of you 25 chief executives, have been formally trained to carry out a selection interview? How many hands do you think went up? Not one. There are 22,000 recruitment companies in this country, and there are 21,900 of them, not much good. So think about that. So preparation, get yourself trained up to be able to conduct an interview. The R in PRET stands for rigor. You're going to be doing some things where you need to be able to look at a number of candidates and you need to bring some sort of rigor into what you're doing. You need evidence from your interview or your other tests that they can actually do what you're looking for them to do. So looking for evidence. And sometimes we're not necessarily helped by the sort of CVs or what the Americans call resumes. Let me read you something out, and this is called, do you really know who you're hiring? To his colleagues, Thomas O'Riordan appeared to have it all. A high-flying city lawyer, he had glided from academic excellence, a first at Oxford and an MBA from Harvard, into a career taking in senior roles in companies such as Nomura and Sumitomo and the Republic National Bank of New York. There was only one problem. O'Riordan's academic record was entirely fictitious. A fact that only came to light when he applied for a new role and happened to claim to be graduating in the same class as his interviewer. The 51-year-old barrister had never attended Oxford or Harvard and had lied even about his school and his membership of the New York bar. He was suspended for practice for 3 years. There is a company which will test out CVs for you. They tell you that 63% of the CVs that they check contain anomalies, and the main ones relate to education. In competitive job markets like we've got at the moment, individuals are coached into selling themselves, but trying to big up what they've done sometimes can go too far. So be careful about getting evidence to show that what you're looking for is actually what the candidate is actually genuinely capable of doing and has got. So check on the CVs. A couple of other things, if you're going to interview candidates, it's pretty much essential today to take notes. One other thing that's happening, of course, in the pandemic is you can interview candidates using Zoom and Teams and the like. And if I'm doing that now, I actually say, do you mind if I record this interview? And if the candidate says no, that's kind of telling you something. One other thing about rigor, when we're doing it in our company, we use a scoring grid. We actually score the things we're looking for that are on that job description that we produced earlier. So we're comparing candidate to candidate and we're giving them a score. It's a very simple, very easy thing to do. The E in PRETS stands for equity. You need to put all of your candidates through the same process. Not only is this legally advisable, but it's also fair. So thinking about the things that you're doing, the steps that you're doing in your system are actually the same. They're the same for all candidates. The scoring, of course, is helping with that. Some organizations I know don't even use or don't even accept CVs. They say to the candidate, we will send you an application form you're sending and do that. If any of you got experience of public sector in this country, that's the normal method. One thing I want to say about CVs, I'm going to come back to this later, but some people get quite surprised when I say, at the interview that you're giving a candidate, never take the CV into the interview. And I'll explain why in a minute. The T's, sorry, was somebody saying something? Okay. The T in PRET stands for tests, technical tests. And I talked about somebody who's an app developer, let's say that you're doing, it's quite easy to run a test of that. If you don't know how to do it yourself, get somebody who does. Test their technical competence. Make sure that you're given a test. And in those cases, in some of those, you make sure it's a pass-fail test. You've got to be able to get to this person's standard. So you're looking at things that you need to be able to do. When I talked earlier on about critical thinking, there are organizations I know who really put very strong emphasis on this. And if you've heard of Hiscox, the insurance company, they make sure that every single candidate for a job in Hiscox has to do the Watson-Glaser critical thinking test. And if they don't pass that test, and it is a pass-fail test, they don't go further in the interview process. Very simple, very rigorous, very easy to do, not expensive. But testing is important. I'm astonished sometimes when I'm talking to chief executives of small businesses and they're hiring salespeople. And they never asked the salespeople to stand up and sell to them. You would have thought it's so basic. If you're getting a salesperson, make them sell to you. Famous story. There's a man called Lou Grade, some of you may have heard of him, who was head of one of the television companies. He was interviewing a salesperson. And on the table in front of them was a glass of water and some glasses, a jug of water and some glasses. And he said to the candidate, "Sell me that jug of water." The candidate got up, walked round the back of his desk, picked up the waste paper basket, set fire to it and said, "Lord Grade, would you like a jug of water?" So thinking about ways that you can get people to really prove they can do things. The last thing about your selection process is what I call stages. If you're doing any sort of process here, you need to leave the most qualified candidates to the last stages and whittle out the ones who are not so qualified at the beginning. So the cheaper pieces of the process come at the beginning, more expensive bits at the end. Telephone interviews, okay, absolutely fine. Things like that. When I was HR director of a large company, there were several other people I used to use in my selection process because I was doing a lot of interviewing. One of them was the receptionist at the front of the building. Is this person nice, this candidate nice to you or not? And the other person I used to use, I was lucky in those days to have a personal assistant who used to have to walk the candidate from reception to my office. She was terrific. She really could suss out the good ones and the bad ones. And I always involved her in the debrief afterwards. So use people who the candidates don't necessarily think are part of the process, but they are. When I'm thinking about the process that you're going to use, this is an opportunity for you, if you're starting a business, to be really quite creative. Let me give you an example. I said the mnemonic here is PRETS. Some of you, if you're studying business startups, may know the story of Pret-a-Manger, how Julian Metcalf and Sinclair Beecham in 1986 started their sandwich shop in Victoria. They hadn't a clue how to do things. They hadn't been to London Business School, and they didn't know what they were doing, and they were quite open about that fact. So how do we select people to come and work in our sandwich shops? And they didn't know what to do. So they said they invented a process themselves. We'll advertise for candidates. The ones we think that we're going to get to be possibly okay, we'll get them to work in a shop for a day. And if they like us and we like them, we'll get them to work in a shop for a week. And if they like us and we like them, we'll hire them. Start and finish of the selection process. What the beauty of that is that candidates are going to be working with the people they're going to be working with for real. So the people that are going to be in their team are the ones who are looking after and selecting them. Neat, isn't it? Very simple, very clever. Now, I've talked about this process. It sounds quite a lot, but one of the things I would recommend to you is to think about getting this process right. And the reason for that is because getting it wrong can be quite expensive. We've done some estimation of what it costs to get the wrong person on the bus. And of course, it varies depending on how much you spend. But it roughly works out at about £40,000 a candidate. And for a small business at startup, that's a very expensive mistake to make. So think about getting your process right. The third step is the actual recruitment piece. You've now defined what your process is. Now you're going to start looking for candidates. And as small businesses, probably the last thing you want to do is go to recruitment agencies or headhunters, because they are the most expensive. And we are looking for candidates at the moment. And I put an advert on LinkedIn this morning. We had 18 responses in the first hour. Sadly, most of them are not fit. But the point being, it's free. And that's where you start. The first thing I would do is go to friends. Look for friends who think you could go to ask you who your best potential candidates are. I find one other thing quite extraordinary. A lot of small businesses, and the ones that I work with as a speaker in Vistage, don't have a careers page on their website. And yet they're looking for people. That's extraordinary. So if you have built a website, make sure that you've got a careers page on it. and make sure there is a description of the job of the people you're looking for. Next, of course, then you get the LinkedIns and the other networks. Social media is a very powerful means for getting it. LinkedIn, of course, is a recruitment network, so that's a place to go to. I would also use referrals, different from friends, but ask people that you trust, who you actually know might have candidates. I was talking to a global head of HR this morning, and she's already telling us that she wants to be able to come into her company. And one of the things about that is that we can refer people in. Another source for you, particularly when you're talking to people who have specialist qualifications, the institutes and the societies that they belong to are really powerful uses. I can go to my local branch of the Chartered Institute of Personnel Development and ask for people who might be candidates for being an HR person working for us. I'm quite comfortable doing that. It doesn't cost me anything. So the institutes can be useful. And then finally, the last two are things like the agencies, the headhunters, and the websites like Indeed. They're a bit shotgun approach. It's a scattergun approach, and you get an awful lot of effort weeding out the people that you need to. So those are certainly areas I would recommend thinking about when you're looking for candidates. Number 4 step is the selection itself, and this is where you're going to really put yourself under pressure. You're going to probably interview some candidates. You're probably going to do some testing, and you're going to do a few other things. So let's talk about the interviewing. We've already covered the fact that you get yourself trained to do it properly. When you prepare for an interview, or certainly when I do, it takes me at least 40 minutes. And in front of me, I have the candidate CV, and if there's an application form, I have that. I have my own job description, and this is an example of one that we're producing. If you can see how detailed it is, it's 2 pages. It's a lot on it. So I'm preparing and looking at the candidates through the eyes of that job description. I have a protocol of questions that I'm asking, and I write them down. And I write them down because I don't want to get the wording of the question wrong. And if any of you want to have a sample of an interview guide, I've got one I can email you to. So send me an email and I can send it to you. It gives you everything from how to start the interview, how to conduct the interview middle piece, and then how to end it. And so it's very comprehensive. One other thing I will do before I'm interviewing a candidate is go and look at what their social media pages are telling me. I know candidates who put stuff on social media about their current employer, which would automatically cause rejection if they were employed by me. So think about that. What do they write about themselves in social media? The other thing about looking at the documents you've got in front of you when you're preparing for an interview, you're looking for holes. You're looking for the things they don't say. When you're doing testing, try and establish a framework for testing, which is incredibly relevant for your particular organization and the people that you're trying to recruit. Let me give you an example. We recently were looking for a copywriter, somebody who's going to help us with the content for our website and all our postings on social media. And we had a short list of 4, and we interviewed them all on Zoom, as it happened. And out of those 4, one of them was absolutely terrific. And we thought, she's going to be the candidate we're going to use. She's lovely. She's terrific. So I gave them all a test, and I paid them for doing the test. The test was, why should companies not use the Net Promoter Score? And by the way, there's plenty of evidence on that on the web. And I asked them to write an article on that. The least performing one in interview was the highest performing one in writing content. The lady we thought was terrific was the worst. So your test needs to be relevant to the role. And don't trust just the interview. Think about how you're going to do that. If you're working in an environment where you're going to have anything to do with technology, testing is essential. You've got to get the test done, because there's going to be a make or break issue for your business if you get the wrong people on the bus and they can't do what you want them to do. Pretty fundamental. And miserable, yeah.
Couple of minutes.
And then the last thing I would say about this stage is when you're conducting interviews, you're doing three things at once. And that's why if you don't come away from an interview feeling really tired, then I'd be surprised. You're observing what's going on, you're listening to what the candidate's saying, and you're formulating your questions. And in the Q&A, I can talk a little bit more about that. The last of the five is what are you doing when you've decided on the candidate? Step number one, make sure that your offer letter that you're going to write to them, and you need to do this as a small business, it needs to have some help from a lawyer. Don't try and wing it. It'll come back and cost you. Secondly, if the company that you're going to create has got intellectual property or will have intellectual property, absolutely make sure that's in the offer letter. There are safeguards in there. Thirdly, you've moved when you're hiring the person from the business of buying to selling. So you need to make sure that that first 90 days of that person when they start in the company is going to be really good. They feel good about the fact that they made a decision to join you. So you're going to be looking at the ways to make sure that they are really, really getting the right sort of feeling from you. And I say 90 days, that's also the probation period. So they know they're on probation for 90 days. First impressions that they have of you as the entrepreneur really make a difference. So think carefully about how you're going to do that. I would also recommend one other thing. Most of the people in startup businesses, you can start them on a temporary contract. And if they work out, you can switch that to permanent. How's that?
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you, Rowan. We were never going to be able to do all of this in a slot like this, but I think so much learned there. We will get to the Q&A. But I think one of the things I wanted to say was, because I now run a small business again, and everything that Rowan said is just resonating, because we made a mistake with the hiring of a director, and he's now exiting the business. He knows he's exiting the business, and it's been painful and expensive and time consuming. So listen to what Rowan's saying, do it right at the beginning. Because we hired on friendship, which I should have known by now is not the way to hire, but we hired a friend and he turned out not to be what we were hoping for. So I think before we get back to the Q&A, I think it's probably time that we bring on some alumni. So we're going to start with Jess, founder of Mate, the next generation dating app that makes online dating feel more organic by creating communities based on affiliations, interests, and causes, and gives people more agency to find people they're excited to meet. So this sounds fascinating. So
Jess and I have met before, but electronically, so I think it's worth saying. So your questions.
Great. Yeah, I was going to give an introduction, but you did such a great job, so maybe I'll skip that. But yeah, I guess I'd be curious, Rowan, as far as I know you talked a bit in the beginning around many mistakes have been made.
Yeah.
Could you elaborate on some of the biggest mistakes?
Oh yes, do you want to hold that?
Sorry. So maybe I'll start from the beginning. In the beginning, you had talked a bit about the mistakes that people make.
Yep.
And I was wondering if you could highlight some of the biggest mistakes that you've seen and how we could avoid that.
Well, Lee's given me a great introduction to that, because we actually had our company has gone through a metamorphosis. We were in a limited liability partnership when we started, and the three founders brought on three other people. And we're no longer an LLP, we're a limited company now, so we've changed our state. But what is important about that is that two of the people we took on board were friends. And one of them was the person who said he was going to be the chief of staff of the business, he was going to run everything, and nothing happened, and it was always late. And we just could not have that. And so he's exited. And it was all friendly and everything else. The other person was a bit more complicated. He came from a marketing background, and he and I had known each other for 20 years. He and I actually worked in an advertising agency in one of my earlier jobs. And we said, we need you to produce the marketing plan. Pretty fundamental. And unfortunately, what he produced was a plan for a plan, not a marketing plan. And that's very, very common that people come from that background. And so when these two actually left the business, it was done very friendly, but it cost us a lot. It cost us probably 2 or 3 years of progress. And it's a bitter pill to swallow. Nice guys, lovely, you know, great friends. We're still friends. It's just that they weren't the right ones for us.
Thanks. So one thing that's on my list at the moment is recruiting a CTO.
Yeah.
I know you talked a bit about the different channels that we can access and use, but I'd be curious if there are any specific things you would target when looking for technical talent to join the team.
Yeah, and let me say straight away, I'm not a technical person myself, so I haven't a clue how half this stuff, you know, I heard a call by a conversation by somebody talking about cryptocurrency a few weeks ago. I didn't understand a word of it. And so one of the things I think you need to be able to do is to get somebody who can help you. If you're not the technical person yourself, then you need somebody to help you to think about how we're going to test the candidates for this. I think the other thing here is that when you're starting a business, the CTO, the technical person, isn't going to necessarily just be doing technical things. So they've got to have a broad brush of experience, a broad canvas of experience to be able to do things. They've obviously got to be able to be master of the technical stuff. And rather like my knee surgeon, you can ask questions like that. And so you need to have somebody who's got some experience of doing it before. But I think, you know, you'd be looking at some of the other things they're going to take on. And if it's a technical business, they're going to be building a technical team. So what's the technical person like in team building? I would say that was a really, really key thing. One of the companies we've worked with it builds satellites. This is not a company where you say it's not rocket science, because it really is. And you know, they're wonderful engineers, systems engineers, brilliantly clever people, but can they manage a conversation with somebody easily? No, is the answer. And so, you know, thinking about technical people, you need to find people who've got the interpersonal skills as well.
If I can cut in, I think there's another way of doing that, in terms of there are so many of these CTOs now will work on a freelance or contract basis. And it's much easier to pick and choose the right person for that bit of the job. I'm not saying that you wouldn't hire, but it might be a different way of exploring it. And with that way, you can back out as well. If they're not working out, it's easier to back out with a contractor than it is with somebody that you've actually gone and hired.
Okay. And is that the position that's CTO as a service?
Yeah.
Okay.
That sort of thing. I mean, occasionally you do come across one or two. I remember when I was in the agency, advertising agency, our CTO, who's an alumni of London Business School, did his MBA here. Absolutely smashing guy, but he wasn't really in there for the technical stuff. He was in there for helping us to understand the technology that we were playing with. And he did that brilliantly well. He's still around. I can give you his name and address if you want.
I think you touched upon this a bit as far as assessing different qualities, but could you elaborate on almost the different rounds you think that we should go through as, let's say, a founder?
Yeah. Are you talking about the process or
I was thinking,
the process?
For the interview process. Yeah.
I think most of you, I hope, know that at the moment in business generally, there is a tsunami of resignations going on. I mean, it's hitting the newspapers and everything else. So there's no shortage of candidates out there. The question is, are you using the right source of getting to the right ones? And I would recommend a laser focus, if you can, on the right areas which you're going to go to. So look for those areas and people who've worked in organizations which are closer to yours, if you can. So trying to get there's no question that, you know, this is a process where you get a lot of names into a hopper and you're going to feed them down to a vital few. So thinking what the steps are. The first one, of course, is a sort of what I would call a resume or a CV sift. You're looking through those. And, you know, it doesn't take you very long to get through those. So you probably reject about 80% at that stage. And then the next stage I would recommend is a telephone interview. And that's where you use a script, 20 minutes, no longer. And you just ask them a few questions and listen very carefully to how they respond to them. Very carefully indeed. It can be done on Zoom and the like as well. It doesn't matter if you can see them. Very powerful way to watch people as well. So the observation piece is you're watching them on Zoom and you're saying, well, you know, is this person actually paying attention to me, or are they looking down and doing stuff? You know, I mean, it's a dead giveaway. Look at how many politicians look down and not at the camera when they're on Zoom. You know what I mean? I mean, it's extraordinary. They don't know how to use the technology. So certainly that, and then you you're getting down to a sort of a number of 10 or 12 people, something like that. And that's the ones you're going to use the tests and the interviews.
Yeah.
Okay. I would certainly think in your case that I would split it into two parts, the interpersonal piece, the interpersonal skills element, and then the technical element. And maybe two of you do this together. So one is doing the interpersonal, another is doing the technical, and treat those as two separate stages. And that usually works quite well.
Okay, great. A trend, just following on that last question, a trend that I've seen is these on-site interviews.
Yeah.
Where people will spend 2 days working together. And I think you highlight, you talked a little bit about what Brett was doing. Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, some of you may have been at university, and when you were at university, you did an internship. My son was at Oxford, and he went to Merrill Lynch for 7 weeks. He thought it was terrific. He was paid more money he's ever been paid in his life. But of course, that was a 7-week interview. And they gave him a job, good news. But the important thing about that, as they said, it's that, okay, it's expensive to do this way, but it's a really good method of testing out candidates. So getting people to actually work with you for a bit, if you can do it, terrific.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. I would ask if you have any specific advice for recruiting advisors. I know probably a lot of the things you mentioned in the framework apply as well, but if you have any specific advice when we think about the advisory team that we're building.
Oh, gosh. I have been around this boy, and not very successfully, I have to admit. The advisors, I mean, it depends on whether they're paid or not, actually.
Could you touch upon both?
Paid advisors usually is much easier than the unpaid type. The unpaid type, you really, they need to be passionate about what you're doing, and they need to be really interested. And I think the second thing is that you've got to be very specific about the role they're going to play. Yeah. So, for example, there are some advisors who you're actually bringing them in because they are rainmakers. They can bring customers to you. Yeah. There are others who can be coaches to you. There are others who can be holding the mirror up to the team. So think about the role you want them to play quite carefully. So define it and write it down. And then if you've got a panel of them, a board of them, then make sure you understand how the whole of that is going to work. The paid ones are a bit different because that's basically an external consultant that you're bringing in to help you, isn't it? It's in that way. And I would be absolutely certain you're very, very specific about what you want them to achieve. Write it down, get their agreement, give them a clarity about the outcomes, when it starts and finishes, all of that. It's the same as hiring a consultant, really.
Okay. Am I out of time?
You're pretty much out of time. The only thing I would say there is, if you're paying them, they're much more accountable.
Yes.
Okay.
Unpaid advisors are great, particularly if they've got skills, as Rowan says, that they're rainmakers or they're people that you know and trust. But if you're paying someone, they're very, very accountable and they have to deliver.
And when do you think it would be a good time in the business to pull someone on as paid advisors? So let's say, for example, I'm about to raise a pre-seed, but maybe that's a little bit early to start pulling on advisors.
Let me give you an example because this is real for us.
Yep.
We've had somebody who we've taken on in marketing, and for about 4 months he was unpaid. He's now paid. So, we're sufficiently pleased to pay him, shall we say. And the paid bit, of course, is still a test. It's still you're analyzing whether this person's actually going to be a fit. Now, why did we need him? Well, because we had a vacancy for like a hole in our team in marketing competence. So that was probably the first thing that drove it. We've got another one who is a business development person. He's already just proving he is unbelievably good. And so that was a really very, very good hiring, if you like. So I think needs dictate what's happening in the business.
Yeah.
Good. Listen, thank you. We're never going to get through all this in one evening, but listen, thank you so much for your questions. If you'd like to change places with Romy, please.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks very much.
Pass the baton to him.
Perfect.
Great. So Romy and I have chatted already. He's got a different sort of business issue.
So Jomi is the founder of E-Like Learning, an edtech startup. That's a very brief description. I don't know if you want to say a bit more, Jomi.
So my status is a bit different. I'm looking for a scaling. So I'll tell a bit about E-Like. In E-Like, we provide personalized and technology-driven private tutoring for GCSE and A-level students. And we have an offshore, onshore, online face-to-face teaching model. And we started our operation around 1 year before with a team of 3. And last 1 year, we grown to a team of 30. We right now provide 500 plus classes in UK alone. And all the teachers are remote, and all are part-time contractors. So I'm looking to scale to around 10,000 classes a month in UK alone. So one of the challenges I'm going to face is we need to grow our staff from 30 to 500 teachers, and we will need around 50 development staff, supporting staff as well. And there will be 2 different cultures from the staff from India and UK. So how can I maintain the quality of customer service and also the operational control when we scale?
Terrific. And it's a terrific idea, by the way. I love the business idea. Let me start by just talking a very few seconds on scaling. Any of you read Reid Hoffman's book, Blitzscaling?
I have it with me, actually.
I'm sorry?
I just finished it, and I just got the Masters of Skill.
Right. It's a very, very good book. And of course, it's about what some of you guys are trying to do and what you're trying to do. And basically, to summarize the entire book, what he says is that when you're scaling, there's only 2 things you need: money and people. That's it. And you've got to get them in the right sequence, in the right order, and everything else. But that's the sum of the book. And that's going to be your challenge. The right people on the bus is going to be so critical for you. The right people in the right places. I think the second thing is coming back and listening to you and what you're trying to do. That the really, really key thing for you is to get this selection system in place. So define what you're looking for. Define the characteristics of a tutor who is going to absolutely delight the customer, which is either a parent, isn't it, or in the main, So what are the characteristics of the student who's going to delight the customer? And of course, the thing is that the parent wants their child to be able to, pass everything, don't they, at the highest level. So the first thing is what are the characteristics that are going to do that? And here is a whole bunch of interpersonal skills that you're going to be thinking about. It's not just the teaching capability. It's going to be how do they react and interact with the student and the parents. So thinking deeply about what you're looking for there. The second thing is also they're going to be interacting with you and possibly with other tutors. So there's a dynamic here for people who are working across the web, through the internet. And so what are their skills like there? You do not want somebody who's always late. You don't want somebody whose technology doesn't work. So start with thinking about what do I not want, and then what do I want. The third thing, with your existing customers, here's a little technique which you can go to, and maybe not necessarily use your own resources to do this. So use an external person to do it. Go to your existing customers and say to them, what are your expectations of an ideal tutor? Not talking about your business, an ideal tutor. Now that's a question which is forward-looking, and it's getting them to move the bar up in their own thinking. And ask them to literally write it down and send it back to you. And you can do this on email. And by the way, that's the technique that my company uses when we're working with customers. So you're asking them for an ideal, and then you've got answers coming back from your customers and telling you exactly what it is. You need to then do a sort and an analysis of those responses. So you're getting a picture of what the ideal looks like, not from your thinking, but from your customers' thinking. So it's customer driven. And when it's customer driven, you're much more likely to recruit the best people.
Thank you. That's very useful. Thank you. So I got two more questions.
Sure.
If I may. So the next question is, based on our experience of recruiting, so if you wanted to grow to 500 members, that means we need to interview like 5,000 candidates.
Yeah.
How do we create an effective recruitment selection and induction process?
Yeah. I think, to be honest with you, you're going to get to a stage whereby you're going to have to outsource this. Toyota, when they built their factory in Burnaston in Derbyshire, I think it was about 1985, they outsourced the entire process to a team of psychologists, and I knew one of them. And she was doing 6 interviews every day for six days a week for 6 weeks. Think about that. She's a psychologist, how she could stand up for doing that. But what was interesting is that they had done the filtration that you need to do, the hopper. And they were looking for shop floor workers, 350 shop floor workers, or that much was the first, cohort. And what they did was they outsourced it, but they maintained the quality and they maintained the rigor of the system by using these people. So that's one of the things you need to be able to think about. I would suggest you start with it doing yourself, because then you know what it's like, and that will help you to select an outsourced agency to do it. And be very, very rigorous about the agency. Literally test them themselves. Put them in front of you and interview them.
Thank you.
And your final question?
Yeah, the final question is, we want to maintain a sense of belonging and enthusiasm, and even partnership as well, when we grow with the people. And also give them an opportunity for positive contribution. While giving the same values to the customers. How can we?
Well, you've already got some great ideas. I love the way that you actually allocate some financial benefit to the tutors for everyone they do. It's a simple, incredibly simple model. But I think there's a lot more than that, than the money. You're trying to create a very powerful community. You're trying to create a sense of belonging, as you say, absolute clarity about what your purpose is, absolute clarity about your values, and really, really walk the values. So people who don't form up to the values, and you can see it happening, they've got to be pulled up quickly and say, look, that is not in line with our values. That's not the way we behave. So make it extremely clear. I think the second thing you're going to need is pretty high levels of discipline. People following, doing it on time, filling in their invoices, all of those sort of, administration things. You are not going to have, whatever it is, 5% of your tutors, when you've got 500 of them, who are administrative nightmares. They are the ones who drain your energy. They're the one who takes you spend much more time on them than you do on the rest. You don't want them. So think about who are the people who are going to be easy to manage from your perspective. And then the last thing is find other methods for bringing them together as a community. So you're going to need some tools, techniques, and methods for bringing them together and engaging their brains and getting them to be part of a community where you are not just asking them to do things in terms of your customers, but asking them to do things with each other.
So, sorry, can I ask one?
Yeah, final one, and then we're out of time.
How do we do it remotely?
You got to work on it.
Okay.
We started our company in 2009. We have been a virtual company since we started. I first started virtual working in 2001. One of the 3 founders lives in Massachusetts. His name is Bill. I haven't seen Bill for 6 years. It is possible to do it, but you need to be disciplined about the way you do it. We meet ruthlessly regularly every Monday, and we have 3 meetings, different meetings for different purposes, on Mondays. And the afternoon ones are for Bill because he's in Massachusetts and it's 5 hours behind. The earlier one is the sales one, because one of the guys is in Thailand. So we're bringing people together from different geographies. At the end of the day, we're having just perfectly normal business conversations. They're assisted by technology.
Jomi and Tess, thank you so much. Great to have alumni here. Starting businesses, running businesses, scaling businesses, fantastic. Something to aspire to. I'm going to close. Also, thanks to Jeff, of course, and to the master entrepreneur here. Little thing, tonight is Trafalgar Night, which is very special to people from the Royal Naval Service, of which Rowan and I were both part of. And it's when we commemorate probably our greatest ever admiral, who took a rather moribund, rather poorly run, unmotivated, scruffy, dirty naval service. And by the right recruitment, by the right training, and by the right selection, and team leadership, and doing something that had never really been seen before in the armed forces back then, in the 1800s, he inspired his men, and they rather loved him. Sadly, he died at the battle, but he turned the Royal Navy from this scruffy, not very well run, underperforming thing into probably the most powerful, strongest Navy the world had ever seen to that date. And that was done on leadership and selection. So lots of these lessons, whatever we think of Lord Nelson, these lessons are eternal. Getting the right people, getting the right motivations, and having your people understand the vision for what you're trying to build. I wish you every success with your course, and I wish you every success with your business when you found them. I look forward to having a drink with you.
Yes, you do.